The morning smelled of gasoline and damp earth. The sunlight was dim and cold, filtering through the shattered windshield, casting fractured shadows across the wreckage. Time twisted slowly as my world shattered into sharp, unforgiving fragments. The screech of twisting metal filled the air, mingling with the sickening thud of impact. The seatbelt jerked against my chest, a cruel reminder of how little control I had. I was trapped, my body held captive by the car that had crumpled around me. The metal groaned, bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And in that moment, I was sure it was over. The chaos blurred instantly. The shattering of glass, the crunch of steel against steel, in the silence. I sat there in that eerie stillness, my ears ringing, the weight of the wreck pressing in on me from all sides. I could taste the bitter metal in the air, feel the engine's heat still running, hear my heart thundering in my chest. I looked out through the cracked windshield, trying to piece together the reality of the situation. My hands trembled, instinctively reaching for the door, but it was jammed shut. I could feel the blood rushing to my head, the pressure building inside of me. I didn't know how much time had passed, but I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. All I could do was pray. And then, amidst the chaos, there was a shift. A surprising peace settled over me. Yes, there was something to smile about. In just those past 2 weeks, I had buried my mom, my grandmother, and my uncle and grandmother on the same day. It should have been nothing but grief, but their presence in the wreckage with me brought a warmth I couldn't explain. In that moment, I could hear my mom's soft and sweet voice singing her favorite song, Toby by the 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐿𝐼𝐻, and those resonating lyrics. I sat down to try to be prepared for what she'd say. And what she said brought tears to my eyes. I couldn't push away. Toby left on a cloudy, rainy day. She went to sing with the angels. Toby's gone away. The song played in my mind like a lullaby, carrying a sense of peace that washed over me. My mom and Aunt Jean had voices that weren't just beautiful, they were powerful, sacred even. The kind of voices that didn't just fill a room, they filled a soul. Their tones were rich with history, lined with grace, and soaked in the kind of wisdom that only women who had endured could carry. There was something about the way they spoke, gentle yet commanding, soft but unwavering, that made the world feel a little less chaotic. So in that moment, when everything inside me was unraveling and I could barely hold myself together, just hearing that familiar tone, like a hymn whispered through time, began to put me at ease. It wrapped itself around me like a warm shawl on a cold morning, reminding me of who I was and who they had taught me to be. That voice, her voice, was my lifeline. It said, "You're not alone. You never were." And somehow, that truth steadied me, even through this storm. Then one of my songs kind of took the back seat. Well Done by Dietrich Haddon. That's all I wanted to hear. I could almost see her beside me, as if she were sitting in the front seat, humming softly like I did as a child. I remembered asking her why there was salt in her hair, the way she would laugh and let me brush it for hours. At the time, I couldn't understand it. Why was salt in her hair? Was she secretly a seasoning fanatic? Was she trying to season herself like one of those old Louisiana gumbo recipes? It never made sense to me, but she would laugh and say, "It's the salt of the earth, baby." So there I was, brushing away, getting nowhere, and learning patience. The hard way. It wasn't until much later that I discovered it wasn't just a seasoning obsession or a quirky habit. That salt, mixed with the layers of hard work and sweat, was part of a homegrown treatment. Something about reducing oiliness, adding texture. Basically, an all-natural alternative to hair care products that came with a lot of Southern wisdom. Just like the egg and mayonnaise concoctions she'd slap on her skin and hair. Probably more effective than anything you could buy in a fancy salon, but wrapped in this cozy down-home magic. It was like one of those cultural staples, the stuff of legend. Pink oil moisturizer and blue magic grease. Back then, those were the secrets of our heritage. And while it's a bit of a stretch to imagine it all now, seeing those bottles on the bathroom counter, the smell of them ingrained in my childhood, well, it feels like a lost art. But here I am, long past the days of salt in my hair and blue magic, thinking back to when my Aunt Nanny would sit me down once a week, her hands moving with practiced precision as she braided me up tight. No curls to run my fingers through, just the rhythmic pull, the quiet patience, and the scent of a 7-Up cake baking in the kitchen, drifting through the house like a promise. She made that cake just for me, no negotiations. The moment it came out of the oven, golden and perfectly moist, it was off limits to the rest of the household. If anyone even thought about sneaking a slice before she baked another one, they knew they'd have to deal with her look. You know the one, where disappointment folds into quiet judgment and leaves you questioning all your life choices. Now, well, I went bald a long time ago, but even though the hair is gone, those memories linger like the sweet vanilla lemon glaze cooling on the counter, warm, indulgent, and full of love. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of territorial victory. With Mom, it wasn't the salt or the mayonnaise that mattered, though. I'll never forget the time we spent together, the care, the laughter, and the simple moments. Those memories you tuck away for a rainy day, like old secrets, holding you steady when life tries to turn you upside down. And as chaotic as it all got, those memories brought a calming, grounding force amid the wreckage of everything else. Even now, I can hear her voice, soft and steady, humming alongside me, salt and all. The world around me felt far away, like it belonged to someone else. I couldn't move, but in my mind, I was wrapped in the warmth of those memories, the sound of her voice, and the love we shared. It was a quiet strength, one that held me steady in that moment when everything else was falling apart. Then the noise came twisting, sirens wailing, voices shouting, but my dad stood out above it all. His voice, raw and guttural, filled the space around me. I couldn't help but listen, his grief consuming the air like a storm. I felt I should comfort him, tell him it would be okay, but I couldn't. My body was broken, frozen in place, and my mind felt like it was floating far away. It wasn't over, but it might as well have been. It wasn't just the wreckage I had to face, but the weight of what had been left unsaid, of everything I had kept buried for so long. As the rescue team worked to free me from the wreckage, I sat there, surrounded by chaos, drowning out the sirens and the sound of metal being cut away. It was my boys, my dad, who gave me hope. But still, I couldn't decide if I would survive this. I didn't get to decide that. Only God could. I could only hope that, somehow, I had lived my life the best I could and left behind a legacy my family could be proud of. Then, I began to hear the shouting. My dad's voice broke through the noise, raw and frantic, his cries of fear and grief blending with the sound of the medics. I couldn't make sense of his words, but the urgency in his voice spoke volumes. He's in shock. He's in shock. The medics were trying to pull him back, but I could still feel his presence, his hands trembling, reaching for me as I watched through the shattered windshield. I wanted to get back, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't respond. But I heard him. I felt him, so I sank back into those happy memories I had tucked away for a rainy day, those happy ones. Once finally being pulled from the wreckage, the blows came. Not the ones from my childhood, not the angry ones at the hands of others that scarred my skin, the ones that came from fists or objects driven by rage to knock me back into reality. These were different. These blows were from love. I could feel my dad pounding his fists against my chest, the force of his hands as he cried out in relief and fear. I couldn't quite process what was happening, but I knew I wasn't being hit out of anger. This wasn't the rage I had known growing up. This was something more profound. Something that came from a place of desperate love, a fierce, unspoken need for me to be alive and survive. My dad and I had grown so close over the years, maturing, conversing, and understanding each other in ways that only grown men could. He owed me nothing but those few conversations, yet somehow they forged a bond that made so much sense. He wasn't angry at me. He was furious at the situation. Furious that fate had dragged me so close to the edge and then spit me back out into his arms. Broken, but still breathing. It wasn't abuse. It wasn't violent. It was a moment where fear, relief, and the sheer impossibility of the situation collided all at once. I still remember him telling me, "Don't you ever do that again." And my first thought, well, I didn't exactly wake up this morning and say, you know what would shake things up? Getting T-boned, shoved into oncoming traffic, and hit by an F-150. But okay, sure, I'll warn reckless drivers to be more mindful next time, but I knew what he meant. And I felt bad. Seeing him like that, shaken and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before, hit me harder than the crash itself. So I swore him to secrecy. Not a single soul in the family would know. Let me heal, process, and figure out how to put myself back together without the weight of everyone's worry pressing down on me. Except that old sneaky cousin of mine, Angela Green, had the instincts of an FBI investigator. A week later, she started calling. Soft at first, just checking in. Then the questions began. And see, I couldn't lie to Angela. It didn't matter that we were hundreds of miles apart. We were still connected just like we had been when we played teacher as kids. If I didn't turn in my homework under that pecan tree on a Sunday afternoon, she was writing a full investigative report to my grandmother. So I had to come clean, because deep down, I already knew if I didn't, she would launch a full-scale inquiry, collect witness statements, cross-examine everyone, and inevitably expose the truth in the most dramatic way possible. And knowing Angela, she probably already had a folder labeled suspicious activity before I even picked up the phone. It was the love I hadn't felt in a long time, the kind that wasn't conditional, the type of love that didn't need to be earned. As a child, I'd always thought love was something you had to prove you deserved. Growing up under my grandmother's roof, love had always felt rationed, measured by what you did and didn't do. But in that moment, I understood something I had never fully grasped. My dad was never a man I feared. He was a man who had his own experiences and loved us the best way he knew how. The weight of that fear had been lifted, replaced by something far more substantial. Love, unconditional and unmeasured, was pouring from him like an outpouring of the soul. I couldn't help but stand, my limbs stiff, my body bruised, but my heart felt more alive than ever. I had never imagined feeling something so powerful, not amid such pain. But there I was, standing, walking. And my dad was shouting at me, hitting me. Funny in the chaos of it all, but there was something deeper there. A love that spoke louder than words ever could. As the team finally managed to free me from the wreckage, it felt like hours before I could even comprehend the fact that I was alive. My limbs were stiff, my body bruised, but my mind had already drifted into a space where the pain didn't matter as much. My father's sobs echoed in the distance, the weight of my past pressing down on me, but I didn't know what to feel anymore. The wreck wasn't just the crumpling of metal, the shattering of glass. It was memory unraveling, loss tightening its grip, and the weight of grief settling deep into the bone. But nothing prepared me for the heaviness of this particular morning, where it all just rushed back like an unpredicted earthquake and tsunami all at once. It wasn't a flash of anger or frustration. It was something far more profound and suffocating. I closed the computer, and in that instant, the world seemed to collapse. Time slowed, and everything I had worked for and fought so hard to leave behind came rushing back. A heavy paralysis washed over me, suffocating, pressing down with a force I couldn't quite put into words. The weight of it all crushed my chest like the past had come to drag me back. I sat and replayed something so profound and traumatic I thought I had put behind me. Planning Mom's funeral, I learned this the hard way. I was standing in the ruins of yet another funeral. I found myself gripping the edge of reality, raw, unanchored, barely breathing beneath the weight of loss. My uncle and grandmother laid to rest on the same day, their names still lingering in the air between hymns and murmured condolences. But before I could steady myself, before the earth beneath me could settle, my mother pulled me aside. Her grip was firm, unshaken. Her voice, low but commanding. It was a moment that should have been about mourning, about holding on to whatever scraps of comfort were left. Instead, she made me promise. Not someday, not eventually. Right then. She grabbed a piece of paper and told me to start writing, to plan her funeral. I flinched. I called my father. I called everybody, any soul willing to answer and step in and stop whatever this was before it swallowed me whole. But no one did. Instead, my father, calm as ever, hit me with a, "Bubba, you got this," like I wasn't unraveling at the seams, like I wasn't drowning in grief and responsibility, in the impossible task of picturing my mother's funeral while she was still breathing. And the wild part? He said it with complete confidence, zero hesitation, like this was something I was built for. And in that grief, that moment, no matter how dire or traumatic that situation was for me, I once again felt that love that I thought did not exist. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the man, but in that moment, I was ready to fight. And yet, somehow, his words had a way of settling me, not because I believed him, but because he believed it. And the moment carried extra weight because, for once, he didn't call me his black baby, a name that, once upon a time, used to sit uncomfortably in my chest. I was the darkest of my siblings, and it took one conversation, just one, to let him know how it made me feel. And that was it. Done deal. Never brought up again. One conversation. One tiny moment of truth. Which begs the fundamental question. What if I had done that 20 years earlier? What if I had spoken up before my identity crisis had the chance to sink its teeth into me? So I have to own that, and I do. What if I had said something before I spent years bottling up insecurities, years pretending things didn't bother me, years acting like words didn't have weight? Because that's the thing about keeping everything locked up tight. It's a slow burn, a silent erosion. It doesn't break you all at once. It just keeps pressing until one day you crack. And grief doesn't wait for your healing. It doesn't pause for you to figure things out. It just demands. But maybe Just maybe that was the lesson buried in my father's words. That sometimes you don't get to prepare. Sometimes you don't get to hold it all together. And sometimes, whether you believe it or not, you have to trust that you got this. As I mentioned before, sometimes people love the only way they know how. So I sat down and did it. Every time I looked away and faltered beneath the weight of something no son should have to carry, she banged on the table, a force that made it all real. She spoke of the crown, the dress, the color of the lining inside her casket. And I kept asking the universe the same question over and over, like some desperate prayer. Why me? Why me to bear this? To witness this? To carry something so unbearably heavy? My uncle, the quiet force of wisdom in my life, gave me the answer I didn't want, but needed. Maybe she knew something you didn't. Maybe this moment wasn't meant to break you, but to prepare you. And with that, I realized I had a choice. I could let grief bury me, or I could set it aside momentarily and honor what she asked of me. Not because I had the strength, but because somewhere deep down, she believed I did. I think about that day often. It forced me into a new understanding of love, not as grand gestures or perfect harmony, but as something more profound, something quieter. Love doesn't always show up the way you expect it. It isn't always loud. It isn't always easy. It isn't always wrapped in the kind of comfort you long for. But it still counts. It still heals. My strength showed up in my uncle's wisdom, the unshaken certainty that I could survive what should have broken me. Someone else saw it in me before I did, before I was ready to claim it as my own. And when the call came in, when reality finally settled over me, grief was immediate, fierce, but so was something else: release. It wasn't just sorrow, it was gratitude, the quiet, aching relief of knowing I had honored her. Every call I had fought against, and every reason I tried to build to justify not doing it, ultimately held me accountable, had convinced me to do it, to set aside the weight of hesitation and give her the farewell she asked for. It didn't make losing her any easier. Nothing could, but it gave me something to hold on to. A small, unwavering comfort that I loved her despite everything I had been through, all she had been through. And there was nothing I wouldn't do for her. Not then. Not ever. Even now, in the quiet moments when the memories press in close, when the confirmation of what I did makes me smile just as easily as it breaks me down, I know. She was my mother, my foundation. And honoring her wasn't just an act of duty, it was an act of love. This keeps the raw emotion intact while smoothing the flow, making it even more immersive. Let me know if you'd like any refinements. And somehow, years later, it became my blueprint for survival. Because life doesn't let you control how it begins, but it does give you the chance to choose how it ends. And my mother? She left this earth not just as a woman, not just as someone's daughter or sister. She left as my number one queen. Flawless, regal, eternal. Crowned not just in death, but in the legacy of love, resilience, and grace she carved into every breath I take. Suddenly, I was forced to relive moments I had long since erased. Memories I had deliberately archived, now playing on a loop without my consent. It was as if my mind had overridden its own safeguards, retrieving fragments I had deleted from my psychological archives and projecting them in high definition, raw and unfiltered. It wasn't just shock, but rage, grief, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. The years I had spent running, rebuilding, trying to outrun the darkness of my childhood came rushing back instantly. I had worked so hard, fought so damn hard not to end up here. And yet, here I was, back in the very place I swore I had escaped. It felt like I was stuck in the same suffocating cycle of helplessness that had defined so much of my younger years. That fear, the one I thought I had outrun, was right there in front of me, mocking me, reminding me how fragile everything I had built was. So many things were rushing back. Leslie was gone, and in true stubborn fashion, I did what I always do when life comes swinging. I refused to pick up the phone. No calls to my mentor Tony, Michelle, Lisa, or Jim. No reaching out. No leaning on anyone. I had to figure this out on my own. But Cheryl? Nah, she wasn't letting me slip through the cracks that easy. She called, texted, and applied pressure daily until I finally answered. And when I did, she and Michelle didn't just offer words. They offered presence, a place to stay, a moment to breathe, a reminder that sometimes carrying the weight alone isn't necessary. Cheryl knew me well enough to bypass my usual tendencies. She started sending things to the house, little gestures that spoke louder than any conversation ever could. Daily motivations, small acts of care. And since everyone who knows me understands my dysfunctional relationship with checking messages, she clarified that a simple thumbs up was all that was needed. And that's how she works. Cheryl doesn't force or demand. She shows up. This wasn't the first time she had shattered the walls I put up. Wasn't the first time she reminded me in her own quiet way that love, unconditional love, isn't about grand gestures. It's about consistency. It's about being present, even when the other person is too stubborn to admit they need it. Our friendship started off as colleagues, me cracking jokes that if I were 10 years younger, maybe there'd be a different story to tell. But somewhere along the way, we found common ground, not just in casual conversation, but in something deeper. Because mentorship has always been woven into my purpose, I found myself guiding some of the people she sent my way. It was never planned, never expected, just divine intervention at its finest. She never seeks recognition, never wants her name in the spotlight. But that's exactly why I made myself a promise. When I finish this project, she will get the first copy, hand-delivered, no exceptions. Because some people deserve their flowers while they can still hold them. And for everything she's done, for every time she stood beside me when I convinced myself I didn't need anyone, Cheryl has more than earned hers. Leslie wasn't just a guide. She was a lifeline. She led me to people who saw me, truly saw me. My primary care physician and nurse weren't just healthcare providers. They became something more. They treated me not as a checklist of symptoms or another name in a crowded system, but as a person, complex, whole, and worth caring for, beyond the confines of a medical chart. Imagine being excited to go to the doctor, something that once sent me into full-blown terror as a child. When I showed up, Peter and his team practically rolled out a red carpet. I swear they would have if they could have popped a confetti cannon every time I walked in. It wasn't just about treatment, it was about real human care. And listen, I'm not claiming sainthood here. Maybe others got that same royal treatment, but when it happens to you, when you suddenly realize that you are seen and valued like that, it sticks with you. That is unconditional love. And then there was Natalie, who had me cracking up so hard that patients in the next room probably thought I was losing it. There was never just medical advice. It was laughter and light woven into the reality of care. And that's what AGAP Physicians was. Whole self-care. The kind of practice that wasn't about just fixing ailments, but about healing people, inside and out. That's why, when Leslie was gone, when I had to make the call to Natalie, the scream that erupted on the other end was so raw, so visceral, that it felt like it tore through every vein in my body. It wasn't just grief. It was proof of the love that had been shared. Proof that Leslie had left pieces of herself in the lives she touched, in the way we now held each other up through the loss. Because that's what these people were, more than professionals and friends. They were family in the truest sense, bound not by blood, but by the kind of care that transcends titles, appointments, and paperwork. The kind that makes you believe in healing that reaches far beyond medicine. And yet, when the weight of everything came crashing down, when I needed support, I didn't pick up the phone. Not because I couldn't. Peter and Natalie were right there, just a call away. But because I was stubborn. I see it now. The misplaced pride, the isolation I forced upon myself as some twisted proof of strength. It wasn't a strength. It was fear dressed up as independence. And looking back, I regret it. I regret every moment I spent convincing myself I had to handle it alone, as if suffering in silence somehow made the pain more manageable. Leslie was an individual I cared about. She represented the possibility of love existing in challenging circumstances, even in a life focused on survival. She proved that care wasn't just given, it was exchanged, built, and reinforced in moments of quiet understanding and fierce advocacy. She wasn't just a guide. She was a mirror, reflecting the lessons I didn't even realize I was teaching her. Reverse mentoring in its purest form. I showed her resilience in ways she hadn't considered. And in turn, she showed me that survival didn't have to mean solitude. She illuminated spaces I hadn't dared to enter before, reinforcing that love could thrive even in its most complicated forms. Leslie had given me the tools, the people, the foundation. She had built something steady beneath me. And yet, in my stubbornness, I acted as if the ground wasn't there, as if I had to balance on nothing but my resolve. I moved as if I had to carry every weight alone, disregarding the structure she had so carefully laid beneath me. I see it now. How much she had placed in my hands and ensured I was not just surviving, but standing, even when I refused to acknowledge it. Now, that representation no longer exists. It's like the light of a candle being snuffed out in a room where I had just begun to see clearly. And in its place, only questions. Heavy, aching weight. A memory that feels too delicate to hold, yet too sacred to release. Untouchable. It lingers like the scent of something familiar, just beyond reach, drawing me back into the spaces where she once stood. I know better now. Healing is not a solitary act. Strength isn't measured by how much weight you can carry alone. It's in knowing when to lean, accept, and trust that you don't always have to be the only one holding yourself up. And I wish I had realized that sooner. But now, with Leslie gone, I had to pretend I still had it all together. Act like nothing had shifted. Like I wasn't suddenly carrying the weight of figuring things out alone. And then, when the news hit, when reality fully landed, I lost it. The total devastation of my office, fists colliding with anything within reach, rage and grief tangled so tightly that the walls themselves felt suffocating. They gave me a pass for shattering the time clock. Let it slide, because sometimes breaking something physical is the only way to keep from shattering completely. But it wasn't just the destruction of my office. It was the destruction of my heart, the unraveling of our future, another weight added to the load I was already carrying, another loss, another fracture. Another piece of something irreplaceable, slipping through my fingers. I've woven that into the passage seamlessly. Here's the refined version. A total devastation of my office, fists colliding with anything within reach, rage and grief tangled so tightly that the walls themselves felt suffocating. They gave me a pass for shattering the time clock. Let it slide, because sometimes breaking something physical is the only way to keep from shattering completely. But it wasn't just the destruction of my office. It was the destruction of my heart, the unraveling of our future, another weight added to the load I was already carrying, another loss, another fracture, another piece of something irreplaceable slipping through my fingers. And yet, Esteran and Latanya never left my side. Not once. They nearly broke that office door down trying to reach me, determined not to let me drown in the wreckage alone. Cynthia was there again. Cheryl, just like she had done when she found out about the accident, stood steady, knowing exactly where to be when the ground beneath me collapsed. My mentor Tony, whose presence carried wisdom and warmth, was there without hesitation. And then Jim and Michelle, who didn't just offer comfort, but action, graciously helping us load up the day before Leslie's homegoing. They stood in the wreckage with me, unshaken, present. No judgment, no pity, just an unspoken understanding that sometimes surviving grief means having people who refuse to let you do it alone. That drive to New Orleans, familiar asphalt, landmarks I had passed 100 times, yet somehow it stretched endlessly, as if the weight of what we were heading toward distorted time itself. The longest drive of my life, despite having driven it for years. Every mile felt heavier, every turn unrecognizable under the weight of grief. And yet, in that car, surrounded by people who refused to let me carry it alone, I was reminded that even in loss, I was not lost. Not completely. Because when your world starts crumbling, when the weight of it all pushes too hard, what keeps you standing isn't strength. It's who's standing beside you. I had convinced myself that I was different, that I had changed, that the past was something I could keep behind me. But now, as I sat there, I realized how wrong I was. It was like a cruel joke, something too real to be ignored. Was this God's plan? If so, what kind of joke was this? I knew he knew. I had begged him, cried out in desperation for him not to let me become everything I feared. And yet, was this the moment it all came undone? Was this my breaking point, the unraveling of all my efforts? See, I wondered why loss had become so redundant and expected in my life, not in the mature understanding of it, but in the pockets and corners that cut deep, in the places where it left wounds instead of lessons. I had spent years trying to heal, learning how to carry the weight without letting it crush me. And for a time, I had help. Leslie, the weight of survival, had been something I'd carried for so long, but now it was different. Now, I felt like I was paying for something, like the universe had come to collect. It had started as something simple. Two minds shaped by the same industry and passions. Late nights poring over data, refining strategies, laughing over the absurdity of online trends. Leslie wasn't just a colleague, not just a friend. She was the one who understood the weight of every decision, the endless pursuit of clarity in chaos. Neither of us expected it, but love rarely announces itself. It slipped into the spaces between the work, the quiet moments, the knowing glances that said more than words ever could. It became part of the rhythmic shared laugh over a failed project, an unspoken comfort on long nights, the way our conversations never needed explanations. And then, without warning, it was stolen. Loss had shaped my life, but nothing prepared me for this. This wasn't just absence. This was violence, a severing of something that was supposed to last. The grief was persistent, accompanied by anger, helplessness, and the realization that love taken by force causes greater pain than love lost over time. Now, survival wasn't just about making it through another day. It was about carrying her with me. The memories that refused to fade, the love that lingered raw and aching. Every familiar moment was a reminder that some losses are permanent, and some loves, even when shattered, never truly leave. And in the quiet, in the spaces where her absence weighed heaviest, I wondered if I had done enough, if I had held on tight enough, if I had said the right things, if I had made her feel how much she mattered, how much she still does. Because some losses aren't just felt. They embed themselves into you, rewriting every version of who you thought you were, every plan you thought you had. And no matter how much time passes or how much you tell yourself to let go, the echoes remain. Her presence offered a glimpse of hope amidst uncertainty and adversity. Without her, I am left to navigate a world that suddenly feels colder and more desolate. The memories we shared now serve as solace and a reminder of what was lost, compelling me to cherish those moments while grappling with the void they left. As the days go by, the ache of her absence persists, underscoring her profound impact on my life. And yet, even in loss, even in the punishment that life had dealt me, she was still here. Not in the way I wanted, not in the way I needed, but in every thought, every routine, every breath. Because some loves don't leave, even when they are ripped away. They linger, they haunt, they shape everything that comes after. Healing isn't a destination. It's a journey that's fought day in and day out, sometimes even by those who seem to be holding it together. Every day we wake up, we must fight. Some of us fight it better than others. Friends and family want you to feel better. They want to take away your pain. What they don't understand is that in trying to take your pain away, they're dismissing and minimizing the extent of your grief. They aren't seeing your reality for what it is. They don't see you. Words of comfort that tries to erase pain are not comfort. When you try to take someone's pain away from them, you don't make it better. You tell them it's not okay to talk about their pain. To feel truly comforted by someone, you need to feel heard in your pain. You need the reality of your loss reflected to you, not diminished, not diluted. It seems counterintuitive, but true comfort in grief is in acknowledging the pain, not in trying to make it go away. I've spent years trying to escape it, but learned it's not about escaping. It's about carrying, moving, and letting it become part of my story. In those years, I stumbled and fell countless times, attempting to leave behind the shadows that haunted me. I tried every possible way to outrun the memories and emotions that weighed heavily on my heart. There were moments when I thought I could break free and felt a fleeting sense of liberation, only for reality to pull me back into the depths. However, as time passed, I realized that true freedom doesn't come from denying our past or pretending it never happened. It comes from embracing every piece of our journey, the highs and lows, the triumphs and defeats. Carrying it means acknowledging the pain and hardship while recognizing the growth and resilience that sprouted from those experiences. Moving with it involves integrating those elements into our daily lives, allowing them to shape who we are without letting them control us. It's about finding strength in vulnerability and purpose in what seemed like chaos. The visible and hidden scars tell stories of battles fought and lessons learned. Letting it become part of my ongoing story is an act of acceptance and transformation. It turns the narrative from one of running away to one of profound understanding and compassion towards oneself. By weaving these threads into the fabric of my life, I create a tapestry rich with meaning, depth, and authenticity. Ultimately, The journey is not about reaching a point where the burden ceases to exist. It's about developing the capacity to carry it gracefully and harmoniously, ensuring that it contributes to the beautiful mosaic of my existence rather than detracting from it. This perspective brings peace and allows me to celebrate the entirety of my being, including imperfections. Because healing, like grief, is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong symphony of moments, each note playing out differently, yet harmonizing into something profound. Some days the weight presses hard, like an invisible hand gripping your heart. But even then, it's okay to pause and let yourself feel. We all carry the weight of what we've lost, dreams, people, parts of ourselves. But we carry on, each step a testament to our ability to endure. And in that endurance lies beauty. Amidst the heaviness, there is always light. Not a blinding flood, but a soft, persistent glow, like the first rays of dawn after a stormy night. It's the laugh that breaks through tears, the warmth of a hand in yours, the quiet moments when you feel yourself breathe and know you're still here. Hope doesn't need grandeur. It resides in these small, sacred moments, reminding us that forward is always an option. Love, though seemingly absent in times of loss, never truly leaves. It transforms, weaving itself into the fabric of our being. It may surprise you, emerging in unexpected places, a shared smile, a new passion, or the rediscovery of the very core of who you are. Losing love doesn't diminish its presence, it deepens it, creating space for new forms of compassion and connection. And when love returns, whether through another person, purpose, or yourself, it carries a richness born from the ache of its absence. Above all, let the love for yourself remain unshaken. You are your sanctuary, your constant in a world that ebbs and flows unpredictably. Self-love is a radical act of survival, a foundation that holds you steady when everything else falters. It's the quiet voice that forgives your failures, celebrates your victories, and embraces your humanity without question. Yes, life may fracture you, but the love you show yourself becomes the glue that binds those pieces together, transforming your brokenness into art. And with that love comes the unwavering determination to press forward, to believe in yourself even when doubt seeps into the cracks. True confidence is born from your belief in your integrity and commitment to work hard to achieve whatever you want. You may not know how to achieve it or even feel certain you will, but when you trust that you'll take it one step at a time, no matter how many mistakes you make along the way or how much fear you feel, you've already won. In that moment, you'll begin to tap into an infinite source of personal power, filling you with more confidence than you ever imagined. We were each just one of millions of people all over the planet suffering, not just from the virus, but from the stress, isolation, and fear. We saw firsthand how fragile we are, how quickly uncertainty can shake the ground beneath us. But we also saw resilience, the quiet but mighty force that pushes us forward even when the path is unclear. Calm witnessed how people turned to tools, practices, and community in need, seeking relief and connection. And yet, while I am grateful that resources were there for people during those difficult stretches, the real challenge is in sustaining that mindfulness, not just in moments of crisis, but as an ongoing practice of checking in, recharging, and honoring the energy that fuels us. Because that internal battery, the source of strength within us, is too often ignored. We take care of everything and everyone else before we care for ourselves. We push forward, chasing success, chasing stability, chasing the next goal, never stopping to ask, how am I doing? How charged am I? And just like a phone running on 5% battery in the middle of nowhere, the risk isn't just exhaustion, It's losing ourselves in the process. So let this be your reminder to pause and recharge. Love yourself enough to check in and hold space for your emotions, healing, and growth. Because the climb that once felt insurmountable is already behind you. The summit is no longer a distant possibility. It's proof that you are here, standing tall, carrying everything you've been through, yet moving forward anyway. And that is your power. And if I've repeated certain moments, particular reflections, it's because life itself isn't linear. Some lessons demand to be revisited. Some truths need to be anchored deep. Because the pieces of these stories, they didn't just shape me. They started a journey of healing. They planted seeds of unconditional love. And those, they are worth remembering. They are worth carrying. They are worth holding on to. Let them be yours too.